The first time I felt it, I brushed it off. Just paranoia, I told myself. But then the small things started piling up. Too many late nights, too many glances away from his phone. And before I knew it, my world was about to unravel. For months I'd sensed something was off with my husband, Jake. Each time I voiced a concern, he dismissed it swiftly, telling me I was overthinking, imagining things, or just plain crazy. One night, though, my intuition wouldn't let me rest. As Jake slept peacefully next to me, I quietly picked up his phone. My heart raced as I swiped past messages from his coworkers and family. Then I saw it. A thread with someone named Alex. My stomach turned as I read words no spouse ever wants to see. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Followed by heart emojis and suggestive messages. Hands trembling, I woke Jake immediately, confronting him with what I had seen. But instead of panic or guilt, he laughed bitterly, rolling his eyes and calling me paranoid. "You're seeing things that aren't there," he scoffed. "Honestly, you're acting crazy." But deep down, I knew better. Jake thought he could manipulate my mind, but I decided right then that I wouldn't allow him to control me or my truth. If he wanted proof, I'd give him proof. And I'd make sure it was the evidence he couldn't deny. After that night, the tension in our home thickened, silently filling every corner. Jake pretended as if nothing happened, acting overly affectionate in front of friends and family, further fueling his narrative that I was paranoid. Yet behind closed doors, his tenderness vanished. He became colder and distant, often staring at me with subtle disdain, as if daring me to confront him again. I couldn't sleep, eat, or even focus at work. My confidence eroded day by day. Was I truly losing my mind? Had I blown innocent messages out of proportion? But every fiber in my body screamed that Jake was hiding something serious. If I didn't find out soon, I'd lose myself completely. But the more I dug, the worse it got. I started checking Jake's social media, his emails, our bank statements, anything that could either confirm or disprove my fears. And there it was. Charges from restaurants I'd never dined at, hotels we'd never stayed in, expensive jewelry and lingerie I'd never received. Each discovery felt like a fresh betrayal, yet Jake never wavered. He played his role perfectly, feigning innocence, gaslighting me into silence. One afternoon, when Jake claimed he'd be working late again, I decided to follow him. I hated the idea of spying, but I was exhausted from the constant self-doubt. Sitting in my parked car across the street from his office, heart hammering, I waited anxiously. An hour passed, then another, until finally Jake emerged. Not alone. Beside him walked a woman I had never seen before, tall, elegant, and heartbreakingly beautiful. My pulse quickened as he casually wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close as they walked toward his car. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. That maybe, just maybe, it wasn't what it looked like. But then, he kissed her. Right there, in the open, like I never existed. My stomach twisted. My hands trembled. And just like that, every last piece of hope I had left shattered into nothing. But my relief quickly dissolved into anger. Jake had manipulated me, gaslighting me until I'd questioned my sanity, all to cover his lies. I snapped a few discreet pictures with my phone, capturing the undeniable proof of his betrayal. But I knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. Jake had turned our friends and family against me, making them believe I was irrational and unstable. To confront him now without more evidence would only reinforce his lies. I needed absolute clarity, something even he couldn't twist. Over the next 2 weeks, I methodically collected screenshots from his conversations, capturing every flirtatious message, every late-night promise, and every lie about his whereabouts. I installed a tracking app on his phone, confirming his frequent visits to hotels around town. Each piece of evidence was painful to uncover, yet oddly empowering. Slowly, I rebuilt the shattered confidence Jake had tried so hard to crush, but then the worst blow came unexpectedly one afternoon. Scrolling through Jake's texts, hidden deep within casual conversations, I discovered not one, but multiple women he'd been seeing simultaneously. Each relationship mirrored the last. Extravagant dinners, lavish gifts, empty promises. My marriage, I now realized, had been nothing but a hollow shell, constructed entirely on deception and betrayal. This realization hit me harder than anything else. Jake hadn't just betrayed my trust. He'd made me doubt myself so profoundly that I had almost surrendered to his narrative. He'd nearly convinced me I was paranoid, irrational, crazy. The audacity of his manipulation ignited a fire inside me, replacing sorrow with steely determination. I wouldn't just confront him. I'd ensure everyone he'd deceived saw exactly who he was. I began quietly organizing all the evidence I'd gathered, creating a detailed timeline of Jake's lies, betrayals, and manipulations. Every screenshot, photo, and text message was neatly cataloged, creating an undeniable, airtight case against him. The deeper I dug, the more determined I became. This wasn't just about proving Jake's infidelity, it was about reclaiming my dignity and destroying the false narrative he'd crafted about me. Friends and family still eyed me with pity, believing Jake's lies about my fragile mental state. Even my mother gently suggested therapy, convinced by Jake's manipulative charm that perhaps I was indeed suffering from paranoia. Each look of sympathy felt like salt rubbed in a fresh wound, but rather than breaking me, their doubt only fueled my resolve further. Finally, after weeks of careful preparation, I was ready. Jake still acted confident, believing I was trapped within the web of lies that he'd spun. But soon, his arrogance would crumble beneath the weight of the truth he'd fought so hard to hide. For so long, I'd allowed Jake's manipulation to cloud my sense of self-worth. He had chipped away at my confidence, piece by piece. Every denial, every accusation of paranoia, every carefully constructed lie. But discovering the full extent of his deception ignited something powerful in me, a determination unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I wouldn't let Jake or anyone else make me doubt myself again. The moment I decided to take control back, everything changed. Instead of confronting Jake prematurely, I carefully maintained my composure. Each day as he played his charade, I quietly prepared, gathering strength and evidence. I enrolled in yoga classes, not just to ease my anxiety, but also to rebuild the emotional and mental strength Jake had spent years undermining. I took evening courses in personal finance, finally learning to manage the assets he'd long controlled. Each new skill, each step toward independence felt empowering, like reclaiming pieces of myself that had been stolen. In the weeks that followed, my transformation became impossible to ignore. Friends commented on my newfound confidence, co-workers praised my renewed focus at work, and even my mother remarked that something had positively shifted inside me. Jake noticed too, though it unsettled him more than anything. He tried questioning my sudden independence, his voice tinged with suspicion, as if sensing his grasp over me slipping away. But I refused to engage, smiling calmly each time he attempted to provoke doubt. His confusion was satisfying, a small preview of the justice I planned to deliver. Meanwhile, I intensified my discreet investigation, determined to uncover every lie he'd told. Using the tracking app, I discovered exactly when and where Jake would meet each of the women he'd been cheating with. He often used the same hotels, same restaurants, even gifting the same jewelry, making his deceit predictable, almost pathetic. I methodically saved every screenshot, photograph, and financial transaction, organizing them neatly into folders, each file another nail in the coffin of his carefully crafted public image. Yet the more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Jake's betrayal went beyond infidelity. He'd manipulated me emotionally and financially, making me dependent on his approval and his narrative. Now, empowered by my growing independence, I saw him clearly, not as the confident, charming man I had once fallen for, but as a coward hiding behind layers of deceit and manipulation. My financial course allowed me to quietly regain control of our assets, transferring my savings and establishing separate accounts he couldn't access. I discreetly consulted a lawyer, laying out a careful strategy for the divorce I planned to initiate once I'd exposed him publicly. For the first time, I wasn't reacting out of hurt or desperation. I was calmly, strategically planning a future free of his lies. One night, sitting alone in the quiet of our home while Jake pretended to work late, I reflected on the woman I'd become. I was no longer weak, doubtful, or afraid. Jake's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had transformed me profoundly, awakening an inner strength I never knew existed. The woman he'd dismissed as crazy now stood poised, ready to reclaim her dignity and reveal his deception to everyone who believed him. My opportunity for justice arrived sooner than expected. Jake's birthday was approaching, a perfect moment for me to confront him publicly, ensuring all those who had doubted me would witness his humiliation firsthand. Jake arrogantly planned his celebration, inviting our closest friends, families, and co-workers. I played along, feigning enthusiasm, offering suggestions for the venue, and even assisting with guest lists. Jake, blinded by his arrogance, never suspected anything. On the surface, we looked like the perfect couple again. Jake publicly praised my renewed confidence, telling our guests that our misunderstandings were behind us, crediting his love and patience for my improved emotional state. His words stung, but I smiled graciously, silently counting down the days until the truth would emerge. The night before Jake's birthday celebration, I meticulously prepared every detail. I gathered the screenshots, printed them out clearly, and organized them chronologically into presentation folders, each labeled neatly with dates, locations, and evidence that Jake couldn't possibly dispute. My lawyer had already prepared divorce documents waiting to be served at exactly the right moment. Everything was in place. As I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. She was calm, confident, and fearless. Someone who no longer tolerated disrespect, manipulation, or deceit. The naive, frightened woman Jake had once controlled was gone forever, replaced by someone empowered by the painful lessons she'd learned. But soon, he'd face the irrefutable truth that he'd underestimated me completely. Tomorrow, at his own carefully orchestrated event, he'd discover that the crazy wife he'd so confidently dismissed had not only regained control of her life, but was also ready to ensure he faced the consequences of every lie, every manipulation, and every ounce of pain he'd inflicted upon her. I took a deep breath, feeling no fear, only quiet resolve. Jake believed he had destroyed my confidence. He thought he'd broken me beyond repair. But instead, he'd done something else entirely. He'd unleashed a powerful force, an unbreakable woman who now knew exactly who she was, and exactly what she deserved. Jake's birthday arrived, bringing with it an air of excitement that hung thickly throughout our home. Guests streamed into the elegant venue he'd reserved downtown, family members smiling brightly, close friends joking and laughing, co-workers mingling casually. Jake moved effortlessly among them, the charming host at the center of attention. He looked completely confident, as though nothing could touch him. I stood quietly near the edge of the room, observing, calmly waiting for the right moment. My heart beat steadily, no fear, no hesitation, only determination pounding in my veins. I'd spent weeks carefully preparing this moment, ensuring there was no chance Jake could spin his way out of the truth. As dinner ended and guests finished their desserts, Jake rose from his seat, tapping his wine glass gently to gain everyone's attention. The room gradually quieted, and he flashed a charming smile. "Thanks, everyone, for coming," Jake began, his voice warm and genuine. "I'm so grateful to have you all here tonight. As you know, we've had a rough few months, but thankfully we're stronger than ever." He turned to me, his smile wide, dripping with false sincerity. "And that's because my amazing wife has finally overcome some of her personal struggles." The crowd clapped gently, some smiling encouragingly, believing Jake's carefully crafted story about my supposed paranoia. A rush of anger flared momentarily within me, but I quickly composed myself. Tonight was mine, and Jake had no idea how severely he'd misjudged me. Standing up smoothly, I stepped toward the microphone, gently taking it from Jake's stunned hands. He hesitated, visibly confused, but backed away with a nervous laugh. "Looks like my wife has something to add," he joked awkwardly, glancing around. All eyes turned toward me as I smiled calmly and confidently. "Jake's right," I began clearly. "These past few months have been incredibly challenging. Jake has made everyone here believe I've struggled emotionally, that I'm paranoid, irrational, maybe even a little crazy. The truth is, Jake's narrative couldn't be further from reality. I've spent months doubting myself, questioning my sanity, all because he was desperate to hide the truth about his infidelity." A tense murmur rippled through the guests. Jake stepped toward me anxiously, muttering something about my emotional state, but I raised my hand sharply, silencing him instantly. "Jake," I said calmly, turning to face him, "you've called me crazy so many times I almost believed it. So tonight, I prepared something special. Evidence even you can't deny." Jake's face drained of color, his confidence rapidly replaced by panic as I motioned to a screen at the center of the room. With one tap on my phone, the screen lit up brightly, displaying clearly labeled screenshots, undeniable proof of his affairs, explicit text exchanges, hotel receipts, and intimate photographs with multiple women. Gasps and shocked whispers filled the room as guests read through the damning messages, their eyes widening in disbelief. "Damn!" Friends stared open-mouthed, co-workers looked away uncomfortably, and Jake's parents sat stunned, horror etched into their faces. Jake stood frozen, desperately searching for words, his charm utterly useless now. This isn't," he stammered weakly, but his voice faded, drowned by the irrefutable evidence scrolling across the screen behind me. "Not true?" I asked coldly, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Would you like to see more screenshots, Jake? Or maybe you prefer the GPS tracking log showing exactly where and when you've met each woman?" Jake's eyes pleaded desperately, begging silently for mercy, but I wasn't finished. "You told everyone I was unstable and irrational, but every suspicion I had, every doubt you twisted into proof of my insanity, was true. You lied to me, manipulated me, and made everyone here believe I was the problem. Tonight, Jake, everyone sees exactly who the real problem is." Around us, people began quietly leaving their seats, distancing themselves from Jake as if betrayal might be contagious. Jake's humiliation was absolute. Taking a final breath, I held up the thick envelope I'd prepared with my lawyer, containing neatly signed divorce papers. "You'll receive a copy of these tomorrow morning," I announced clearly, placing the envelope gently into his trembling hands. "Consider this my final gift to you." The room was deadly silent as I turned away from him, making my way toward the door with my head held high, my dignity restored. Jake's carefully built facade lay shattered at his feet, leaving behind a man exposed, humiliated, and utterly defeated. Outside, the crisp night air filled my lungs, and for the first time in months I felt free, completely and undeniably free. Jake had underestimated me entirely. He'd believed I was weak, easily manipulated, and incapable of standing up to him. But tonight, I'd shown everyone, including myself, just how wrong he was. In the aftermath, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages of support flooded in from friends, family members, and even co-workers who had once believed Jake's lies. Each apology felt healing, and each expression of support reinforced my strength. I hadn't just exposed Jake's betrayal. I'd reclaimed the truth of who I was. Jake would have to face the consequences of his actions. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, and some lessons come at a price. Yet I knew the real victory wasn't merely exposing his infidelity. It was the profound transformation I'd experienced in myself. I'd moved from a place of doubt and fear into a position of undeniable power and clarity. Standing beneath the city lights, breathing deeply and steadily, I knew Jake's betrayal had forever changed me, but not in the way he'd intended. I was no longer afraid, uncertain, or manipulated. Instead, I was fearless, independent, and unbreakable. He'd lost everything because he'd underestimated the woman he tried to control. Tonight, Jake finally realized that the wife he'd called crazy wasn't crazy at all. She was strong enough to dismantle every lie he'd ever told, brave enough to expose his true nature, and powerful enough to reclaim her life entirely. And as I walked away from the chaos I had left behind, a smile slowly formed on my lips. He thought he could rewrite my story. But tonight, I burned his version to the ground, and finally, for the first time in years, I was the one holding the pen. In the months following Jake's public humiliation and our divorce, my life transformed in ways I'd never imagined. At first there was silence, an empty apartment, quiet evenings alone, and moments of uncertainty. Yet in that silence, I discovered something invaluable, the peace of knowing I was finally free of deceit, manipulation, and self-doubt. With each passing day, I grew stronger, more resilient, and increasingly confident in my decisions. Friends and family, once influenced by Jake's lies, began to reach out with sincere apologies attempting to reconnect. While some relationships healed easily, others required more time. I learned to forgive, not for their benefit, but for my own. Holding on to bitterness or resentment would only have chained me further to the pain Jake had caused. Instead, I chose to move forward. Jake's life took a far different turn. Stripped of the charming facade he'd built so carefully, he struggled to maintain friendships and professional connections. Rumors about his behavior quickly spread, leading to isolation and a series of personal and professional setbacks. His desperate attempts to regain control or rewrite the narrative fell flat. The damage he'd done was irreversible, not only to our marriage, but also to the trust of everyone who'd once respected him. Initially, part of me felt vindicated, seeing him finally bear the consequences of his actions. But over time, I realized true healing wasn't found in his suffering. It was in my growth and empowerment. Jake had taught me, albeit unintentionally, the true value of self-respect and emotional independence. Never again would I allow someone else's manipulation to distort my sense of reality or worth. Professionally, my life flourished. The strength I'd discovered translated directly into my career, leading to new opportunities, promotions, and recognition from colleagues and superiors. I felt empowered, no longer held back by doubt or the fear of being misunderstood. Every challenge became another opportunity to prove to myself and the world that my resilience was unbreakable. Emotionally, I took my time rebuilding trust in relationships. Dating was cautious but deliberate, focused less on finding someone to validate me and more on finding a genuine connection rooted in honesty and mutual respect. Eventually, I met someone who valued openness, vulnerability, and authenticity as much as I did. This new relationship was built slowly and carefully, free from manipulation or secrecy. It felt genuine, real in a way I'd never known before. In one quiet evening, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the city skyline, I reflected deeply on the journey I'd been through. Jake had called me crazy, had gaslighted me into nearly losing myself completely, but his betrayal had inadvertently unlocked a deeper strength within me. Instead of breaking me down, he'd given me a chance to rebuild myself from the ground up, stronger and wiser than ever before. That realization made everything clear. Trust is precious, easily shattered, and rarely restored. Manipulation and deceit may grant temporary control, but they inevitably destroy relationships and reputations. The real victory isn't found in revenge, but in reclaiming your dignity, confidence, and power. No one can define your reality or your worth unless you allow them to. I had learned that lesson painfully but permanently. Jake's betrayal, though devastating, ultimately taught me how crucial it is to trust your instincts, honor your truth, and never let someone else dictate who you are or how you feel. It showed me that strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about facing it head on and emerging resilient on the other side. My story wasn't just about infidelity. It was about survival, empowerment, and rediscovering self-worth. Jake had once called me paranoid, irrational, crazy, but I had proven that real strength lies in knowing your truth and having the courage to stand by it, even when the entire world seems against you. I smiled softly into the evening air, feeling genuine peace and gratitude. Jake's betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also set me free. And in that freedom, I had found something far more valuable than revenge, myself. Because in the end, the truth wasn't just about him, it was about me finally believing in myself again. What about you? Have you ever overcome manipulation and reclaimed your truth? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear about your journey.